Thanks for joining us this evening. This is the City of Aspen City Council work session for February 13th, 2023. Tonight on our agenda is the new Castle Creek Bridge Public Education Outreach Summary and Next Steps Recommendations. Before we go ahead and get right into the topic, I just want to say hello to everybody in the room. It is nice to see all of you here tonight. Tonight's discussion is exactly that. We're not going to be solving any of the entrance to Aspen's issues, but we're deciding on next steps as we try to work with our community to get to some of those next steps. And with that, we'll go ahead and get into our presentation. It is about an hour and a half, a little less than that, but broken up into different segments, so we'll take it as we see it. Diane, are you introducing?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Mayor and Council, and thanks for everyone in the room for your patience. While we did test this today, we decided it would be better if we waited a little bit, so make sure everyone was here. And if folks who are in this room for the first time or in City Hall for the first time, there are restrooms just out this door to the left if you need them. So with that, my name's Diane Foster. I'm the Assistant City Manager. Here at the table with me is Pete Rice, Trish Aragon, and Jen Uten. And also I'd like to introduce the other members of the team. Jack Dannyberg is doing slides for us today. Mike Horvath is in the audience. Jamie McManus can't be here with us today. Sarah Ott's part of the team. Lynn Rumba and Lorena Vargas is also here. And also in the room are our communications partners, Jeanette Downauer and Rachel Brenneman of Downauer Manifest. And a couple things to let you know. One is there will be times when we read our presentations. And while that doesn't always happen, we're doing it this time because this is both an important issue and a contentious one. And so words matter now more than ever. So we want to make sure we get this right. We also want to thank our partners at CDOT, Roland Wagner, who's the Central Programs Engineer, as well as David Cesark, the Planning and Environmental Programs Engineer. Roland's been a valuable resource to our team during this process. He's attended multiple events with us, and CDOT and the Federal Highway Administration have been helpful in answering questions that we could get answered now, and have also been supportive of this process as Council directed. So today, we're here to talk about that first step in the community conversation about the entrance to Aspen. And as you all know, we call this the new Castle Creek Bridge, specifically because the bridge is the last big remaining piece of the preferred alternative record of decision. And as a reminder, the council direction was specifically to inform the community about the preferred alternative so the community would have a common understanding of both what the record of decision was as well as the preferred alternative. Also, and importantly, we wanted the community to understand why this conversation was important and why it's happening right now. So today we'll talk about what we did, what we heard, and what's next. And at nearly every presentation, we started with the video. In addition to showing it to the community at all the meetings, during the past 7 weeks, it's actually got over 4,000 views, which is a lot for a city video. So Pete's going to start us with the video now. And even though you've all seen it before, you might catch something new by watching it again.
Can you make that full screen? Oh, there we go.
I think I can do the voiceover at this point. I've seen it 100 times. Hi, my name's Sarah Ott.
The least important part.
But it needed an introduction.
That's great.
For getting in and out of the city of Aspen. This effort is known as the entrance to Aspen. Recently, community conversation about the entrance to Aspen has been picking up. This is namely because the Castle Creek Bridge is nearing the end of its design life. We need to start planning for a new bridge now. Together, our community can build a better transportation future for Aspen. That's why I want your participation in this community conversation. This video will tell you the history of those planning efforts, the progress we've made to today, and where we can go in the future.
Back in the mid-1990s, Aspen spearheaded a massive, multi-year community engagement process to develop a highway and mass transit system to better access Aspen. The process included participation from a resident and technical advisory committee, and dozens of meetings up and down the valley. The City of Aspen worked tirelessly with the community and Pitkin County, Town of Snowmass Village, Elected Officials Transportation Committee, EOTC, the Colorado Department of Transportation, CDOT, and the Federal Highway Administration to define a collaborative solution. To help guide this process, 10 objectives were identified as needs to be met to improve Aspen's transportation network. After carefully analyzing 43 possible solutions, CDOT and FHWA selected the one that met the project purpose and need, as well as all 10 objectives defined by the community. This solution, known as the preferred alternative, was included as part of an official document called the Record of Decision that was completed in 1998. The improvements and changes outlined in the Record of Decision modernized key transportation infrastructure elements from Buttermilk to Ruby Park. While some recommendations were implemented, others are in the queue. One of the major pieces of the Record of Decision to be completed is the way traffic moves in and out of Aspen. This aspect of the plan includes a realignment of Highway 82 for general traffic that, by design, allows vehicles a smoother entry into town, so there is less reliance on side streets, like Power Plant Road, which affects traffic in the West End. The preferred alternative approved by CDOT in the 1990s extends Main Street to the west over a new Castle Creek Bridge to connect to Highway 82, as it exists now at the roundabout. The roadway will consist of 2 general-purpose lanes, one in each direction, as well as an exclusive lane for mass transit. This will create a continuous route from the airport all the way into town to better accommodate mass transit systems that provide a car-free option for commuters. The mass transit lane will be designed to accommodate cutting-edge transportation technology like trackless trams, driverless buses, or a light rail. It is worth noting that every phase of this plan meets the highest environmental and air quality regulations to reduce environmental impact, ensuring that Aspen stays clean and beautiful. New connected open space will be created between the roundabout and Cemetery Lane where the highway used to be, and a new land bridge will connect the roundabout to Main Street and minimize the impact on the surrounding landscapes and ecosystems, creating a new wildlife corridor to keep animals safe. Expanding our transportation network is important. Even more so is a path for exiting Aspen quickly and safely, especially in an emergency. Due to climate change, our community faces a rising danger from forest fires and mudslides. Because of the increase in natural disaster activity, we need to prioritize evacuation routes in Aspen. The current S-curve does not meet this need. The preferred alternative, however, will increase the capacity and improve safety. Right now, we're in a good position to evaluate the next steps for the entrance to Aspen. Our current Castle Creek Bridge is aging. It was built 62 years ago and needs to be replaced soon for everyone's safety. We're going to take this opportunity to create a safer, more sustainable, and resilient transportation ecosystem.
Time is of the essence. Let's get serious about replacing our bridge and working with our partners to implement a solution to keep our community safe and our transportation system relevant. For more information about the history of this project and its future, as well as how you can stay involved, visit castlecreekbridge.com.
Thank you, Pete, for pinch hitting. So some people in the community asked, why do we have to talk about this again? And then other people in the community asked, why is the city still talking about this? Will you just go ahead and build the bridge? That is absolutely the range of sentiments. So we always started our presentations answering this question, why now? First reason is the current Castle Creek Bridge is 62 years old. It was built to last 75 years. However, the volume and the weight of the traffic that goes over it every day is beyond what anyone could have imagined back in 1961. The bridge is currently rated 50.3 out of 100, and that was rated in 2022. CDOT rates bridges good, fair, and poor. We're at 50.3. Anything below 50 is poor. The current Castle Creek Bridge, when it does eventually need a major renovation, we expect it to take 18 to 24 months, and during that time, we would have one lane of traffic crossing the bridge. It would be similar to the experience we had this fall. However, it would be a much longer time period. However, the bridge is safe, and CDOT will always ensure that the bridge is safe. The second reason it's important to talk about a second bridge now is that with climate change, the risk of wildfire has become increasingly significant over the past 20 years. And while we pointed out the risk of wildfire in every presentation we gave, many individuals and groups, even one of your boards, told us we need to talk even more about that. They told us it's important to talk about the risk of wildfire and also to talk about the challenges to emergency evacuation presented by an aging two-lane bridge. So now we go back in history. As a reminder, City Council direction was to inform the community about the preferred alternative. And as a reminder, that term preferred alternative, it's actually a federal government term given to an alternative in any record of decision that meets the project purpose and need, and also, in our case, meets those 10 project objectives that the community defined.
Diane, can I just clarify one thing before we move on? 50.3, that was the last time that the bridge was rated, correct?
That was this year.
But prior to the work?
Prior to it was 53.4.
53.4, and now we've done some resto work, and that may improve it, but we haven't been re-rated.
No, we have been re-rated, and even with the joint work that was done, the rating went down.
To
50.3.
Oh,
so we went from
afterwards.
53.4 was the rating approximately 2 years ago, and then in late December, early January, the rating of 50.3 came out after
Got it.
the second inspection by the state bridge inspectors.
Thank you for that.
And they did a second inspection so that they could look into the bottom, because we were told that they were only able to complete a surface one this fall, and then we're scheduled for every 2 years. And I had asked when the CDOT guy was there, well, will you complete the inspection this year? Because he had said we ran out of time to inspect the underneath.
So that inspection report's a public document that we can forward to you. I don't know how thorough they view their underside inspection to be.
Yeah.
What we can tell, though, is that even what they did see gave them pause
With
by
50
the reduction in the rating, even after the substantial investment that happened last summer.
Thank you.
That's helpful.
So on November 1st, 2021, when John Kruger had come to talk to council the previous September, so in November 21, council approved and appropriated $150,000 for community education process around the record of decision. And so this was a website, print campaign, public open houses, and the video you just saw. Then fast forward to April 22, in a city council work session, council provided support for this education project and approved the scope of work in a work session. So that was, the first piece was technical analysis to clarify and produce documentation about how the 43 alternatives were created and assessed. And that document is on the city's website, which you can find at Castle Creek Bridge. CastleCreekBridge.com will redirect you to the city's website. Second was to engage with the Colorado Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration to understand the process for moving forward and the risks of opening the record of decision, and as well as potential for funding. And we've done that. And third, you gave us direction to update the entrance to Aspen materials and plan to prepare for a community education campaign. At that time, council told us that you wanted to see anything before we talked to, you wanted to see those materials before we talked to the community. So we came back on November 28th and 22. We presented the video and the community awareness materials. And that presentation was 45 minutes without questions, so we ended up paring it down after that meeting to, we had kind of 15-minute and 30-minute versions that we presented. So in November, on November 29th, the day after that work session, in a city council regular meeting, a change order was approved to increase the funding for communication services with Down Arrow Manifest Communications. This change order increased the breadth and depth of education efforts that were implemented in this first phase. So these have been really important partners. We actually went out and met with, actually CDOT came here a number of times to meet with us as a group. In addition to, they came on site with us and we did a site tour with both the CDOT and the Federal Highway Administration. Sarah, Pete, Trish, and I went down and met with the Federal Highway Administration in Denver in the September, October, and we just appreciate the partnerships it provided. The thing we wanted to let you know is we did make change based on feedback during it. The most significant is this one example. Some residents from the villas of Aspen, their homes were not visible in this particular image and in some drone footage that was used for the video. And that phrase drone footage is really important because at first we had to kind of look into it and then we realized it was actually from real drone footage. So our team reviewed the video and images and realized that the homes are being hidden by tall trees that surround them. So we didn't alter any real images. Obviously, the bridge is put in there for conceptual purposes. So if you go to the next slide, we added this image to it. And this image has always been there in the video. In fact, I saw it a few times when watching the video, and we added this still image to our presentation. So when we talked about that one of the downsides of this project is that it would impact some people's homes, we wanted to make sure we actually showed where it would happen. And as you can see in this picture, their homes are actually hidden by some tall and really beautiful trees. We also made other adjustments based on community feedback. And this slide's intentionally blank. That's just because I wanted to take a minute and just step back and say that when I think about this project, it would have been easier for City Council to avoid this conversation altogether. and Tori said that, versions of that multiple times. While it's been an important community conversation since the first vote, which was 48 years ago, the age of the bridge and the increased risk of wildfire make this conversation more important than ever before. So Aspen and the Roaring Fork Valley, as you know, have gone through a lot of change since the first entrance to Aspen vote in 1975. That change includes population growth, skyrocketing real estate prices, loss of local businesses. And we read the newspaper every day, and some feel that the soul of Aspen is at risk or even lost. So talking about changing the way most people enter and leave Aspen has always been difficult because it requires trade-offs. The S-curves are an element of Aspen's community character, and they are part of its history. Changing the way people enter and leave town requires both an acknowledgement of that change and of the trade-off, even if those things could improve transportation and make the community safer. Thanks, Jack. So, here are the questions we're going to have for you today. We'll come back to them at the end. Basically, is council supportive of staff moving from a proactive to a responsive communications process for this next phase? Jen will talk more about that. Number 2, have you heard that we missed somebody that we should go talk to? And third, we'll ask you about the volume of communication you'd like to see as compared to that first phase.
Diane, I should have asked this before, but can you go back to the page with the bubbles along the inform, activate, and perhaps explain what that process is for a moment?
Sure.
So that, yeah, there we go.
Great. So this is from a group called the IAP2, which stands for, and I'll look to Sarah for help, International Association of Public Participation. Okay, IAP2. And
which is a gold standard used for helping articulate communications between governments and residents and voters, so that this is a spectrum that you may go back and forth on throughout a project, but with intention, you share with the community which of these have you chosen as part of your direction in an education process. So there's clarity about the level of involvement and how input will be taken. So we'll say versus joint problem solving. And at this point, the council has had a very limited direction of it being information out and collecting comments back.
Right. And then what would the next stages represent, Sarah? That's what I'm trying to get to, is we've only been in what truly is information, background, whether that's upsetting to people or not upsetting to people, it is the background we're all dealing with. And then we go forward in a conversation. How would you see the next steps? Or how are these described by?
Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, I was just pulling up my cheat notes
I think
because I always talk about it in too much detail.
One of the things that Sarah mentioned is that it's iterative, right? It happens multiple times. And this phase for entrance to Aspen has helped, this whole continuum has happened multiple times over this project, right? Because collaborate and empower and involve, that all happened in the development of the record of decision and the creation of those 10 objectives. So we do plan on going through this again, both in the next process of this, if the council would like us to move forward, as well as throughout the development of this.
Yes, thank you for that. I just wanted to have this in the context of the questions you're asking. Appreciate it.
And I will share that the degree of difficulty and public impact, as it increases, the arrow is very subtle at the top, but as it increases, it is more and more placing final decision-making in the hands of the public. So that's a public vote at the very right side of any public policy decision. And you're always talking about what's the goal of public participation, and what's the promise that we're making to the community when we accept feedback and engagement at these different levels. So if you're, I'm happy to forward you the cheat sheet, so to speak, that you can have as handy reference.
Yeah, thank you. I just really, again, want to clarify, we're at a very first step type of role. It's not as if we've started vetting new alternatives or any sort of discussion beyond. This is where we've been, and this is the history, and this is what we have today. Thank you.
Helpful, thank you. So, as you all know, Aspen has changed dramatically since the first bridge was built in 1891, and ever since the current bridge was built in 1961. It's within this particular context that our community awareness campaign was launched. Most people we talked to were a good mix of the old and the new. Most people thought our community has changed, but to whether they thought a new bridge would change the character of Aspen for better or for worse, those results were mixed. The message we heard the most was that people want to be involved in the discussion and want to help to control the future of their community. The bridge was the anchor for these wide-ranging conversations. So now Pete will talk to you about what we did.
Thank you, Mayor Tory and Council, for listening to us tonight. I'm really proud of this team for the last couple months. We really went out into the community and tried to be really proactive and getting in touch with people. And I'm also proud of the community for being cordial and meeting with us during a busy period of couple months. The goal of the community awareness effort was to share information, as Diane said, of the record of decision, the preferred alternative, the layout, what it looks like, and discuss a lot of the why now. It's really important that people have this understanding, and it's also important to know that we went through the history of the project. We updated the information, as Diane said, with the videos to make it easier on the community to understand. And we definitely wanted to review the condition of the existing bridge. It's an important piece of this whole puzzle that is important for people to know. So staff heard from council in November and made every attempt to communicate with the community. It's been a busy few months. These numbers only are to January 26th when we ended this, but we have continued to meet with the community even after. A few interesting notes here is the awareness campaign was only 70 days long, and we had at least one event on 37 of those days, with several of those days having multiple meetings. We had 47 small group events, one-on-ones, and around 3,800 post views, which is really good for the city. To continue on with some of these accomplishments, we had 3,300 web page views, which is very high for the city. And I would say that one thing I'm really proud of is we put a lot of effort into reaching all the groups that impact this community, including the Spanish-speaking groups and some of those communities that are all impacted by the transit of Aspen.
Can you hold on one second right there? Hey, by a simple show of hands in the audience, could you raise your hand if you attended any of these outreach meetings? Anybody here in the audience attended some of the outreach meetings? The in-person ones, not just online? Thank you so much. Thanks, Pete.
So our goal was definitely to reach a wide number of people and to try and make it as easy on them as possible. We tried to meet people where they were located, or HOAs, or different civic groups, senior communities, definitely the medical community. So we really tried to branch out and grab a bunch. Several of the people are here tonight, but we did listen to the Villas of Aspen. That's a group that's going to be directly affected by this project, as everybody is well aware. We also met with the Rotary Club, is another interesting one on this list, because there are a lot of our business leaders in the community, and the transit into and out of Aspen highly impacts their businesses and everything in this, or all their business aspects in this community. To continue on a little bit with some of the groups, it was really important. Oh, this picture right here shows a meeting with Cemetery Lane, and it's important to know that a lot of these meetings were in person. We tried to do as many in person as we could, try to meet people. It's good for staff to get out into the community for a variety of reasons, and I feel like we did a very good job of this. It's important to also make sure that the rest of the government groups, especially those involved in EOTC, including Snowmass and Pitkin County, were included on the increased understanding of the record of decision. Also, we met with the first responders, and it's really important for them to be involved in this process and for them to have an understanding of what the record of decision means and how it impacts their world. And finally, it's important to know that we met with almost 1,300 people in 37 days, and we've heard from over 33,000 people through emails or different contacts. I'm very proud of our team for this effort in the last couple months, and now I'll pass it back to Diane.
Thanks, Pete. And I appreciate that Pete talked about how the team did, because it was a grind, and it was a grind. It was fun, it was interesting, it was great to meet people and talk with them, and it was also exhausting. City Council, as you know, directed staff, as Sarah mentioned, to inform the community about the preferred alternative. During that process, we did receive feedback. However, because we were in the inform stage, the program was not designed to specifically measure community sentiment. However, because we heard from roughly 1,300 people, we do want to share what information we did hear. So in general, the feedback we received fell into these 5 groups. These are general, right? There's a continuum within here. And it didn't fall 20%, 20%, 20%. It's just I wanted to represent all the groups here. And while we did not quantify the feedback, in discussions with our internal team, we did talk about, where did we think kind of more people fell than other places? So first, understandably, those whose homes could be impacted, like those who live in Villas of Aspen, 802 West Main, some of the homes in the Bavarian, are not supportive of the preferred alternative, nor a new bridge in the preferred location. Now, some Harbor Lane residents do not support this project, but other Harbor Lane community members that we talked to did support it.
Where's Harbor Lane?
Under?
Oh, power plant. Okay.
Yep.
Right by the harbor.
Right by the,
I lose Mill Street significantly, so.
Well, there's no mill there, so, yeah.
So this group of people, some of whom are here and have some really awesome stickers, one of which says, "The S-curves are sexier." This group of people wanted to keep using the S-curves as the primary way to enter and leave town. Some wanted to keep it a 2-lane bridge, while others wanted to change it to a 3-lane bridge, and some wanted 3 lanes with a reversible lane, and some wanted to see if it was possible to do a 4-lane bridge in the current location. So next up, some folks wanted to explore other alternatives that weren't selected. And importantly, every alternative that we heard someone tell us about that they wanted was actually one of the 42 alternatives that was considered and evaluated and not selected. Many of whom wanted a different alternative felt their alternative would solve traffic congestion specifically. In our discussion with the Federal Highway Administration and CDOT, we did ask, what if the community wants a different alternative? They indicated it would require either reopening the record of decision or a completely new record of decision. The CDOT team also said a new record of decision may not include the community. In my experience with records of decision, that was pretty unusual that they put the community up front rather than at the end during a public input process. So next up, these are people who want the new bridge that is described in the preferred alternative, but had questions or concerns. As mentioned earlier, we did not measure the input received. However, there were times when we asked groups if they thought a new bridge was needed. The project team felt, and again, it's not statistically measured, that the majority of people we talked to in this process fell into these last 2 categories. So they wanted a bridge and then maybe something else. Quite a few people told us that Aspen needs a second bridge, and many of them had questions or concerns. The people who want a new bridge generally liked the open space, they liked the land bridge, and they liked the visuals, even though we let them know it was conceptual and the community would be involved in that process. They also liked that there was contiguous bus lanes from the airport to Garmisch. There were also many questions and concerns about various elements of the preferred alternative, and some of those we actually can't answer until we go into what would be the next phase, which would be a 30% schematic design. A question like where exactly it would land when it comes across onto Main Street, where would the bridge land, how close would it be to buildings, those kind of questions. The question was something that resonated with many people in this group, as well as wanting to be part of the decision-making process, which is what we heard from everyone. One of the major concerns about, and people who fell into this group, was that the preferred alternative does not solve congestion for single occupancy vehicles. It makes the flow of traffic better, however, it doesn't reduce the traffic congestion. Some asked if the Main Street backup would get worse. And the business community was very concerned about the impact a one-way bridge would have on their employees and their businesses if a new construction if construction would need to happen on the current bridge. This were people who liked the preferred alternative as it is written and described in the record of decision and would like the city to hurry up and get it done. Like others, they liked the bridge, open space connection, draft design, and probably one audience that we don't have up here and that we actually realized it in our rehearsal was an audience we talked to, but I don't have on this slide, and that's directly impacted commuters. So we have a number of events where we talked to those folks, and when people said, I live in Valley, we said, hey, you might not be part of a future vote, but you're important to our council. Most of those wanted a new bridge. Some wanted the preferred alternative as is, and others wanted the solution that would solve traffic for single occupancy vehicles.
Diane, at some point, I'd love to come back to that and let's discuss what the actual preferred alternative is.
Yes. Can absolutely do that.
And just to ask, solves more if you're talking about a decision for an unrestricted 4-lane.
That is one thing we heard. Some people thought a split shot with restricted lanes would be better.
Unrestricted and not
Unrestricted.
transit
Correct.
priority.
And
Thank
not
you.
a mass transit priority, correct. And just because Tori brought it up, the preferred alternative is one lane in each direction for car trucks. From the roundabout through the Merle Thomas, under a land bridge, over a new bridge that connected to Main Street. And there would be a new light at the intersection of 7th and Main. Two lanes, one for cars and trucks, and 2 dedicated transit lanes. One of the things that we did point out in our presentations was that preferred alternative would create up to 6 lanes that could be used for evacuation. You know, and public safety would make that decision. They might decide they would use 3 of the 4 new lanes for outbound and 1 to get ambulances in. Or they may decide that they would use all 6 lanes. The preferred alternative, as a reminder, also, the old Castle Creek Bridge would still remain. However, the section of Highway 82 between the roundabout and Cemetery Lane, or between Cemetery Lane and the roundabout, that section goes away. So you could still use Cemetery Lane as a way out of town, but if you go over what would be the old Castle Creek Bridge, you couldn't get to the roundabout from there. And obviously, folks who live on Cemetery Lane had questions and concerns about that.
Yeah.
Diane is explaining the infrastructure portion of the preferred alternative, and it's a phased infrastructure implementation. So that's one phase of the preferred alternative. It also includes uses and programmatic as far as TDM measures.
Management.
Yeah. So that's one element of the
Really
preferred
important point. And in fact, we went into a ton of detail, and we're happy to bring up the slides if you want to go through them later as well, to describe what's been done in the preferred alternative, like Owl Creek Road, and what things have yet to be implemented. Because a lot of the preferred alternative has been implemented.
So I'll come back to it again later. I'm still not clear. I've seen 3 different versions or renditions of the preferred alternative and the alignment. I've seen everything from 2 lanes of traffic and the light rail corridor, 4 lanes of traffic, 2 bus lanes, 2 general, and then another recent depiction of 4 lanes, 2 bus lanes, 2 general traffic, and an apron so I've seen 3 different versions, and part of the reason I'm asking is because the community wants to know which one it could or would be.
That's a great question, Mayor Tory. Absolutely great question, because what I didn't describe was what the preferred alternative actually says about the bridge and about going through Merle Thomas. So it's 2 phases. The first one, it allows, so the ultimate answer is light rail across Merle Thomas with 2 lanes. So I'll start from the beginning. What it says is you can have 2 general purpose lanes, which are cars and trucks, 1 in each direction, and 2 dedicated bus lanes, but they must be dedicated bus lanes. So 4 lanes total, 2 for cars and trucks, 2 for buses. That's the initial implementation of the preferred alternative. The preferred alternative says at a point which light rail becomes feasible for the community, and we know that feasible means economically and technologically, mostly economically at this stage. So when that becomes economically feasible, the community can choose to go to light rail in the future without ever going back and getting a new record of decision.
So the record of decision allows the form of mass transit to be upgraded over time by the community.
Yes.
But critically, to Tori's question, if I'm understanding it correctly, the added width that we see in those renderings is because it's designed in such a way that whenever that transition may or may not happen, you can continue to run the buses while you're creating that light rail, and so there's a footprint for both.
Yes, one of the very helpful things we learned from the Federal Highway Administration is that we actually don't have to build the whole bridge to meet what light rail would need in terms of infrastructure and weight. We could actually build light rail later.
So you could kind of
next
straight
to it.
razor that part off.
And a point of clarification too for the councils, recall, the community has already deeded the right-of-way for this project to CDOT. So the footprint of the alignment, should the preferred alternative or a version of it chosen, has already been conveyed to CDOT.
And that's because they mitigated it
Yes, they
way
did
back in the
mitigate
day with new open
Jaffe
space.
Park,
Thank you.
the open space between the river and Brush Creek Park and Ride. So I just want to emphasize to you, there are some constraints there when the community made that choice at the vote about 15-plus years ago to make that conveyance occur.
Thank you.
And just to add clarity, the city attorney's office and staff at this point believe that a vote is needed specifically because the 1996 vote approved that right-of-way, and it actually approved the 2 lanes of traffic and light rail across Merleton Thomas. It did not, however, approve bus lanes over Merleton Thomas, so we believe that a vote is needed for that. And Tori, I really appreciate you asking this, because I remember it when I first started looking at this, I was probably meeting with these guys every day for a month, and I still wasn't clear as to what it was. So when Trish talks later about what process that we'll go through with CDOT on this initial design, it's actually an iterative process, because the community needs to hear it multiple times to understand it, and also they'll have multiple points of being able to have input in the things, the parts of this can be modified and changed. So this is actually another way to look at some of the feedback. And again, we didn't measure, so these aren't exact numbers, but they're kind of proportional to what we heard. When we asked Rotary, what, do you think a new bridge is needed, right? Like, nearly every hand in the room went up. However, there wasn't always consensus about what should be on the bridge.
That's right.
So then, next slide, is that these were some of the biggest concerns and most frequently asked questions we got about the preferred alternative. Now, remember, there are a whole set of concerns of people who live near there, but these were concerns we heard about the preferred alternative specifically. To highlight a few, people wanted to know what the impacts would be to neighboring properties. We had about 30 people from Cemetery Lane meet with us, and they wanted to know how long will it take for them to drive kids to the schools? How do you access Holt and Marolt? How much would it cost? How does this impact Aspen's character? Some of these questions can and are planned to be answered in the next phase. So some key takeaways. Community members absolutely wanted more background and more detailed designs so they can better understand the project and form an educated opinion. They also wanted to be included. Some people expressed frustration that they were not part of the preferred alternative selection process, and some of them didn't live here during that time. And some felt that at this point, the only choice is the preferred alternative. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Trish, and what Trish will talk about is if council tells us to proceed, what would happen next?
Is there any clarifying questions for what we've seen so far?
No.
Okay.
The next phase of the project will include the investigative study and the formation of various teams to answer the community's questions that Diane went over earlier in the presentation, while at the same time continuing to inform the community. These teams will collaborate through the design process. This includes a project leadership team, which is a stakeholder team that leads the project and facilitates formal actions required by councils, boards, and commissions. For example, this will include various members of several boards, such as Council, RAFTA, and EOTC. These individual members will report back to their respective boards regarding the statuses and issues the project is addressing. Then they will report back to the project leadership team with feedback they receive from their boards for the project to consider. Next is a technical team, which is a multidisciplinary team that includes experts in all areas of the project, and it's made up of federal, state, and city and consultant representatives. There'll also be a project staff team that assists with the development of the project and provides input into the methodologies and technical analysis. Now, this technical team is very specific on the particular issue they're analyzing. So for example, if it's transit-oriented, this technical team will involve transportation experts. If it's environmental-related, it's environmental experts. Then there's the issue task force. And this is, again, a multidisciplinary team formed to address project issues, and it includes stakeholders, which is about including the community members and experts surrounding the issues. So these tasks, there's going to be several of these task forces, and they'll work through the elements of issues to reach a recommendation for the project leadership team, the technical team, and the project staff. Now, each issue task force is specific to the issue being addressed. For example, if it's trails and open space task force, they'll have members that are very different than members of the task force associated with the historical resources. Next is the context-sensitive solution process that will be part of this phase. So each of these teams are involved in each part of this process. And this is a circle, this is a continuing circle that continues around. It doesn't start, I'm going to start with problem identification. It doesn't end with design. It continues on in the circle. So this is a process the Colorado Department of Transportation uses in its transportation planning and project development to ensure that projects are tailored to the specific needs and context of the communities that they serve. The context-sensitive solutions process is a collaborative and interdisciplinary approach that stakeholders and experts at various fields to consider the unique factors of the project area. Again, these steps include the problem identification, context analysis, solution development, and design, and it continues in that process. The first step of the context-sensitive solution process is the problem identification. In this step, the issues and needs that the project will need to address are identified. This includes needs such as trail alignments, possibly the need of additional community garden, for example, of some of the issues associated with this project. The step will include gathering information and input from stakeholders, which again includes community members, and it will include the formation of the project leadership team that will help lead the project. Additionally, the technical team and the project staff team will be involved in this stage. So that's the initial stage where these teams are beginning to form. Next is the context analysis. So you identify the issues, and now you analyze those issues in its context, how it relates to the project area itself. So the city, along with the affected stakeholders, assess the issues in context of the project area to determine the most appropriate solution. This analysis typically includes considerations such as the area's uses, historic resources, and environmental impacts. Some examples of this analysis will include the issues and uses surrounding the open space itself. An issue task force will be created for each issue. As I mentioned earlier, this is a multidisciplinary team that includes stakeholders and experts surrounding the issues depending on the issue being analyzed. And they'll work through the elements of these issues to reach a recommendation for the project leadership team, technical team, and the project staff team. Next is the solution development. So based on the context analysis, the technical team, again, multidisciplinary, that includes experts in all areas, will develop a range of potential solutions that mitigate the issues identified in the context analysis. So if it's a transit issue, they'll develop solutions around that transit issue. If it's a historic resource issue, they'll develop solutions around that issue. As a result, this step will assess the feasibility, cost, and impact of each solution. And the step is a collaborative decision-making process that prioritizes the needs and goals of the community. Now, you've gone through this, you've identified issues, you've done this context analysis, you've identified solutions. Now we can start that design process and what that looks like. So that's the beginning stages of the design work, using construction and engineering best practices. Now, it doesn't stop here. It continues back into that process. So this is the ongoing monitoring and adaptation as the design process proceeds to ensure that the solution remains effective. As a result, the process, like I said, doesn't end, and it continues through that circle that was shown in the beginning of my presentation. So this process helps to ensure that projects are designed and implemented in a way that is sustainable, efficient, and respectful to the community.
Skipper, you got a quick question?
Dude, Trish, can you help orient me? So if I were just looking at the last 5 slides, it feels like we're describing starting over with a blank sheet of paper. But I think what we're talking about is applying these things specifically to the preferred alternative. And I just want to clarify that that's correct.
Correct.
Okay.
And just for the benefit of folks who may not be familiar with this, this is the required process. This is not the optional process or the massaged process. This is what we have to do to meet the Department of Transportation's expectations and design refinement.
So the goal of the investigative study is to answer the questions that we receive from the community and council during this initial phase that we've gone through. So far, we've issued the RFP for this work and expect to hire the consultant team later this spring. Again, the important part of this investigative study is the context-sensitive solutions process. This is integral to the development of the schematic design. The schematic design will include things like a superstructure assessment, structural concept study, roadway design, safety analysis, bus and shuttle location analysis, evacuation route analysis. And it will also incorporate recreational use, landscaping, and utility designs. A geotechnical analysis will also be performed to review the current geotechnical data and provide recommendations for bridge and land foundations. The investigative study will also include a full cost estimate along with an estimated time frame for construction, including a conceptual phasing approach. Now, as you recall, the estimates that we presented to the community were from 2016. And as you can imagine, they don't represent the true project estimates. And this is some of the feedback that we did receive from the community is how much will this cost? And so the point of, or part of this investigative study will be able to get our minds around how much this will cost. The investigative study also includes an origin and destination study. For example, we'll look at where people are coming from and where they're going to. So this is important to help us to understand traffic patterns on roadways such as Cemetery Lane, Power Plant Road, Castle Creek, Maroon Creek Road, and Main Street itself. The investigative study will give us an understanding of any potential impacts on the environment, including impacts on threatened species, recreational facilities, greenhouse gas emissions, wetlands, floodplains, and historical structures. Finally, the project could also assess the existing Castle Creek Bridge and evaluate the impact of construction and rephasing of its replacement. Again, the goal of this study is to answer those questions we received not only from council but also the community through this informative stage that we've been in with the project. Now I'm going to hand this off to Jen to talk about the timeline for the project.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm Jen Uten, and I'm a senior project manager in the city manager's office. Diane will be stepping away from this project to focus on other work within the organization, and I will be taking over as a co-lead role, as a co-leadership role in this project. The next phase of communication will transition from a proactive phase into a responsive phase. So that's that first section there from February to April. Although there will be no public meetings in this phase, community members and groups who want to speak with the project team will continue to meet with folks. We will be selecting the consultants for the investigative phase of the project, including the context-sensitive solutions process. The RFP went out in January, and responses are due March 23rd. The RFP is intended to answer questions that we heard from the community, and we would expect to get information from the investigative phase this summer and fall, with the traffic studies concluding next winter. And additionally, surveys and other work would continue into 2024. The next phase related to communication we've talked about as phase 1.5, so mid-February through the end of April. And the RFP consultant would then be on board, and the city during that time would remain as a source of information until that time when the consultant is on board and can kind of take on that next phase of communication. The communication strategy following this council meeting will shift from proactive informational to responsive communication during that period. Staff plans to continue to respond to questions about the project as they're received and to meet with any individuals and small groups on request. The public conversation about the new Castle Creek Bridge project will be monitored, and staff may respond as necessary to correct any misinformation. We've recently updated the frequently asked questions on the website to answer most of the questions that are able to be answered at this point with additional information. And then we'll move to the next slide. So we talked about this a little bit already, but moving from the inform to the consult phase, which is obtaining public feedback, and then the involve stage, which is working directly with the public throughout the process to ensure that public concerns and aspirations are consistently understood and considered.
Yeah.
Just to clarify again, when we move to the consult phase, we would just be asking for feedback on the preferred alternative. We wouldn't be seeking feedback on those other buckets in which there's a variety of opinions.
It would be the process that Trish just went over related to the context-sensitive solution related to the preferred alternative.
Thanks.
So we'll return to those questions that we posed earlier in the presentation. Is council supportive of staff moving from a proactive to responsive communication process for the 1.5 phase? Did we miss anyone in this first initial outreach and inform period? How much community outreach do you want to see in phase 2? And then regarding volume, do you have any feedback for us from the outcome of the first phase? Was there something missing in the first phase that you'd like to see? And what would you like us to accomplish in the next phase?
Thanks, Jen. All right. Yeah, I've got a couple of clarifying questions and such,
If you
but
want clarifying comments.
yeah, sure. I'll start off. If you don't mind, can you go back to the RFP 8 bullet points? I want to start off by saying that I see some of these as being more important to get done up in the front than other parts. The origin and destination study, I think that is something that could help us even in near-term actions and solutions that we might be wanting to do. Origin and destination, I think, is very, very important. Traffic analysis for current demands, things like that. Historical structure evaluation. I think all those are things that should be happening or, could be happening before we get to public participation with the context-sensitive solutions and a schematic design. It feels like we are just not there for a schematic design. I'm very hesitant for my support tonight for this entire scope of work. I believe the council has budgeted maybe $2 million that I think this is for those funds. I'm not all on board with what is being expected in this scope, and I think some things are a little out of sequence. Can you go to your timeline slide, please?
Just real quick, so we heard where your concerns and statements are. Was there a clarifying question in there? I just want to make sure we didn't miss it. We've described this work that it's phased, right? And so we've given you the laundry list without giving you the phasing of that, because that's part of what a consulting team would propose back as what they see as the sequencing of work. But we're certainly open to making that directive to respondents.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, is there a way to phase it? Is there a way to get some of the information we want before we start jumping into design? I still don't know what we're designing. I'm 2 lanes plus, 4 lanes plus, 6 lanes was mentioned. I still don't know what we're talking about designing, so I think we're just moving a little fast here. I would love to see some of the information before we, so my question would be, is there another possibility for this process? Because this doesn't sound like it's really going to get us the opportunities that we have in front of us. That's my question. But let's go to the timeline if we could. Responsive communication. So we just did a public outreach for a couple months and we got a bunch of questions. Is the responsive communication plan to answer those questions?
So a number of the questions that we received, we cannot answer without doing
Schematic design.
somewhere between 90% and all of what you saw in the RFP. So the RFP is actually specifically designed to be able to answer questions. Now, could we answer some of those questions short of that? Yes. The specific answer to your question is the responsive phase is just meant to, instead of us going out and actively scheduling things with people, going out to groups and saying, can we come meet with you, is that we're letting people know, if you want to come in, if you want us to come talk to you, please call us, please email us, and we'll go sit in someone's house in their living room, or we'll go and talk. Jack recently talked to a real estate agent that wanted to bring him in for a staff meeting to talk about it. So we're happy to go and talk to anybody or meet with anyone, but we're not actively going out and scheduling meetings ourselves. Thanks.
Okay. Again, I'm struggling with saying that we need to go to 90% of schematic designs or something to answer.
30%.
30% design, sorry.
The 90% is in reference, could you go back to that slide, please, with the
whole
scope?
list.
Okay.
Of that, of that list, 90% of it is based upon the questions we receive from the community that they would like clarity on, so they feel informed to participate in future discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still struggling with what we're designing. That's all I have for this.
Can I respond to that, Mr. Mayor, with what you're saying you're struggling with?
Sure.
So to be specific, what our recommendation continues to be is to build the 2 general purpose lanes and the 2 bus lanes. As we know, every highway has shoulders that can be in an emergency turned into additional lanes as well. So that is how you get from 4 to 6 in an emergency situation, is those shoulder lanes that are provided for breakdowns, et cetera. So if there's any more detail you need about that, so that is our proposal here. Staff is not proposing light rail design. As we've shared with the community, the initial construction estimates of that are well over $500,000 in old numbers.
Billion.
I'm sorry, $500 million. Yeah, I wish it was $500,000.
Just for
$500 million in old numbers. And the operating cost of that is substantially more than operating the bus lanes with frequent routine service.
I appreciate that then. Then I guess I'll share this with you now then, because this is the conversation we're having. I think if we are working on those designs and that kind of proposal as an option for our community, I don't think we're going to get community support behind that. So I would be very cautious about moving forward and spending millions of dollars on a proposal that I don't think that we're going to get the kind of support that we want to move this forward. So, Rachel, then Ward, then Skippy.
Yeah, thank you. First, I want to thank the team. You guys have really gone out there. You've spent a lot of time with people. Some people were pretty pleasant, and some people were not so pleasant. But I really appreciate the gathering of information. And for those in the audience, in our packet, which is available to the public, we had 24 pages of comments that they have tracked down, and each page had about 28 comments on it, unique. So there really is a lot of good public feedback. Some have asked why even bring this up. And I have to say, I feel it would be entirely irresponsible of the City Council not to tell people that the bridge will need to be replaced and that it is reaching the end of its useful design life. And oddly enough, we've built pieces of the preferred alternative that we take for granted now, that we're no longer traveling over a 2-lane railroad trestle bridge at Maroon Creek. It feels safe. It's a safe bridge. It accommodates the buses. That's important. We've already built the bus lanes that bring 5,000, 10,000 people into town a day without their cars, guests, workers, everyone. So there's components that have really made it good for us. The roundabout. If it weren't for the roundabout, the prior designs had that as basically a 6-lane plus shoulders, signalized intersection, not as much through traffic at all. So there were some bad alternatives that this program eliminated and gave us a system to try to control traffic growth, to manage traffic growth in the future. As I looked at this, I take a little bit of a different tack than our staff has come forward. Just maybe it's in sequencing. But for me, there's a lot of questions that we need to have answered by Colorado Department of Transportation. And those need to be answered for our public. I've heard some comments that, oh, we'll get them to do night construction when they finally build our bridge, or we'll get expedited construction because we're Aspen. And I've been working on transportation funding issues for decades now, and the state is billions of dollars short of what are already approved projects. They are divided into transportation planning regions. We're in the Intermountain Planning Region that we share with Eagle, Vail, and the I-70 corridor. And the last time I went, they can knock off about 2 projects a year, maybe 3, and the total list was well over $1 billion, and they don't get nearly that much every year. So, we have to have an approved project or project our community is really willing to go forward with to even get on that list. And then hopefully it really does come to fruition before the bridge fails or is waitlisted or has other things coming on to us. So I would want to change this sequence to where we try to get CDOT to answer some of our questions about their funding processes, the TPR process, how you get on the 10-year state plan, which again is not fully funded. They just have a plan, and occasionally people drop off when their plans aren't done. But in general, you have to move up the list, and it's pretty slow. That's why we've brought and supported questions like a sales tax increase across the state to try to fund bridges and roads and things like that, and it's just not happening very quickly. So I think that answering some of those CDOT questions is very important for our community, both the funding out there, but even more the record of decision and environmental impact statement questions. To my mind, this is about a choice of a corridor. We do have one corridor that was picked in the preferred alternative back in the day. It was fully mitigated by CDOT at that time so that they could build the bus lane, so that they could build the roundabout, things like that. So that is one corridor. Other people are now suggesting a second corridor to re-examine, could something work at Castle Creek. Could the S-curves be saved where the current bridge is located? And again, to my mind, looking for amendments to the existing corridor that CDOT had identified is kind of, quote, opening or amending the record of decision we have today. To look at a different corridor, a totally different corridor at the Castle Creek Bridge, starts to be a new environmental impact statement and a new record of decision. You know, blank slate, open it up. That is the goal of many people who would love to see an unrestricted 4-lane into Aspen, and I've met with some of them who believe, quite frankly, parking garage under Wagner Park, $40 a day is nothing when you're already paying $6 an hour on the surface, and there could be a lot of things in that that our public doesn't really want coming out of a reopened record of decision. It's kind of the devil you know versus the devil you know behind that door. It could be an unrestricted 4-lane across the Merle corridor. It could be something different there. But one way or the other, the Department of Transportation, it's their highway, and it's their users up and down it. And I was around when this first one came out, and I can tell you, Aspen was spending $8,000 a month on lobbyists in Washington, D.C. We were meeting with every official we could to not have an unrestricted 4-lane and to have a program that would allow us to manage traffic growth in the future. We risk throwing that away. The next bridge, the next design might be more about how do you speed the access of those single occupant vehicles as opposed to mass transit. It's either going to be a mass transit priority system we pick or a single occupant vehicle system we pick. And there's a lot of people driving those single occupant vehicle cars who really want their journey improved as opposed to worrying about parking in town or character or things like that. So I'm going to continue down my little list here. It'll only take a few more minutes. But I think we need to have those questions really answered by CDOT to our public, to all of us, before we begin other major steps. I also would like to take the step of saying, how can the Aspen Institute's mobility plan be integrated into either the new design, the preferred alternative, or how could it be integrated into the existing bridge, which we will all still be using for quite a long time now. There's no bulldozers warming up. There's not any funding. It's going to be Castle Creek Bridge for a very long time. But how would we integrate that mobility plan? Because I think that's what the public is most concerned about, who I've spoken with, is not wanting to have that unrestricted 4-lane, to not having buses take second boot and be in mixed traffic, and eliminate any real advantage or reason for people to want to take mass transit. But I think it's critical that our public knows we're interested in the Institute management plan. We want it costed. We want to know how much would it cost and how could we implement that? Can we implement that with what we have now? That's also a plan to control traffic growth, has a lot of really cool elements, picking up carpoolers to avoid a fee coming into town, but it would have a fee coming into town to encourage people to use mass transit. Carpools would probably be free. Maybe local residents would get 25 passes a month, you know, before you start charging. But if the origin and destination study shows anything like it did before, an awful lot of our traffic is generated by us in between the Golden Triangle with Snowmass, Aspen, Picken County. We'll find out. But I think that it's important to make sure we're integrating a a management system. The bridge itself is infrastructure. The management system is separate. They don't conflict with each other. They need to work with each other. And I don't quite know how you put a congestion pricing type of mechanism on the existing bridge, but that's the type of program that people are talking about. I also think it would be important for the next council to make the choice to go forward with this sort of $2 million. I agree that these are the right steps. I agree that when people are asking, well, what would the land bridge look like? Or could there be 2 land bridges? Or what will this look like? How do you access that? We need to be able to answer those questions before we can move forward. So the team has absolutely brought us the right next steps. But I just am saying I think there's a few small steps before those. I do think that's a decision for the next council. I do think that, again, we need answers from CDOT so that this council and the next council know, and the community knows what we're really up against. But I have fears of us not have something in place before the bridge is weight restricted. I have fears of going through these sort of summer detours, patching it together every couple of years. And particularly that there's a point in time in which CDOT will say, enough Aspen, we're not going to throw more good money after bad, we're going to do a new bridge. And, you know, it is their highway. I think that the danger, again, of opening that record of decision up is that it will be based on the population in the valley and the commuting public in the year 2024. It won't be based on the valley's population we saw when this was all crafted. I was at the table. I can't remember how many people told me, the valley will never get to 40,000 people. We don't have to worry about that much traffic. But it would be based on the 2024 traffic needs, projected out for 50 years, because they're going to build a bridge with a 50-year lifespan. So I don't know that that's a door we all want to go down. But that is the danger in saying a new record of decision, a new corridor, let alone the time and the money that we would all have to spend on that. So those, again, are my conclusions. I do think it's irresponsible for us to have ignored it and to have just pushed the can down and let people think perhaps the bridge will last forever when it won't. But these aren't easy conversations. And I'm proud of this council for being willing to bring the conversation to the public and let them know what the danger is. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Just a
Thanks,
quick
Rachel.
comment, if I may, Mr. Mayor, on Rachel's. I just want to highlight, thank you for bringing up the Aspen Institute's Integrated Mobility System Study and the Upper Valley Mobility Report. We actually, after we saw council, we updated our presentation to include that, and because the record of decision actually says that if we go past, if we implement the preferred alternative, if traffic increases above the 1994 levels, that the Federal Highway Administration and CDOT has the responsibility of enforcing that we keep to those levels using those traffic demand management tools that are described in the IMS and in the Upper Valley Mobility Report. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Diane.
Thank you for that, Diane.
And then, Rachel, I wanted to give you an update as well on your first one. Actually, just today I saw a compilation of CDOT questions, and they'll be forwarded on as soon as possible, even tomorrow, hopefully.
Okay, thank you.
Board, and then Skippy.
Following Rachel's always kind of you cover most of the things that I want to speak about as well. I did serve on the Aspen Institute Mobility Task Force for about 15 months. And I agree that the bridge and the goals of the mobility study are a little bit separate, that implementation of congestion pricing and ride share, ride hailing, all of those can be done probably with either alignment. My belief is that we need to answer some questions about the S-curve question instead of assuming and putting all of our energies into the preferred alternative, that we need to answer the questions that the community is raising and that will continue to be raised. We've had a number of votes, and if you look at the history of the votes, and you'll see that the alignment, the S-curves, or the preferred alternative alignment are with 1 or 2 percentage points in most of those votes. So there's still, and those votes were taken with a different demographic. A lot of people that voted on those are no longer in town, and there are a lot of people in town now that were no longer, were not there when we voted on that. So it is it's a different community. I want, before we really go down into deep study on the preferred alternative, If you visualize just using the S-curves as the entrance to Aspen, we have to look at a lot of different things. How long is that going to take to construct? What are the restrictions on the use of power plant road during the construction? Are accelerated bridge construction techniques applicable to this application? Would we have to soften S-curves to make future mass transit usage available? And what would that look like? How much land would have to be acquired? How many people would be out of their homes? Is there agreement that light rail is no longer an option because of the cost and phasing? Those are questions that I think are foundational to proceeding. I think that, for me, I think that the preferred alternative is attractive, and I don't visualize using the existing S-curves as an easy process for the construction, the amount of time it's going to take to construct the new bridge, and what power plant road can be used for, and those aforementioned, when is a power plant road not going to be able to be used if we construct S-curves? If we just look at the studies and go, well, we'll do an S-curve or we'll do the modified direct shot, the preferred alternative, and tomorrow we'll have that in place, it's a lot easier decision, but it's going to take years to get this done, and that's one of the reasons that we're doing this now is because, as Rachel mentioned, how long it takes to get processed through. And if we have to reopen the record of decision, how many years is that going to be? And are we going to be at weight restrictions? We may be at weight restrictions within a year or two. So we really don't have the benefit of time anymore. Time is of the essence, but the foundational question, I agree with Rachel, is an alignment question. I think it's the S-curves or the modified the preferred alternative. And I want to appeal to everybody. This is going to be a long process, and that we at the council table directed staff and our consultants to educate, not advocate. Yet there are a lot of people that felt as though we were advocating, saying it's the preferred alternative or nothing at all. It's a decision that dictates the future for probably 2 generations of Aspen into the future. So it's something that we should be done collaboratively. We're not going to reach, they're probably going to be 52% of the people that will agree on something. If we get to 55 or 60, it would be almost unbelievable. So we all have to understand that no matter what decision is taken, that the rest of the community is going to live with it, and we're going to have to live with it. And it's, Rachel mentioned, or Skippy, somebody mentioned the 24 pages of comments that are in our packet tonight. We've read those comments, and what's going to happen is probably one of these alignments is going to be chosen, and everybody that commented against that is going to think we didn't listen. And just because the decision that you advocate isn't chosen doesn't mean it hasn't been thoroughly studied and evaluated. And we, as elected officials, we try to listen to all, and we have hundreds of pages of packets that we read. We listen to public outreach. We intentionally do not go to public outreach sessions because it's been told to us many times that when we go to a public, when an elected official walks into a public outreach, that the tone of the conversation changes. I don't believe that, but people are tell me that that's really the case, that as soon as that maybe that people don't want to be free about criticizing what is being presented, that it's really important to get a full, unfettered view from public outreach. And for that reason, we really don't want to go, we don't want to advocate a position. We want to listen and see what the community wants. So the fact that city council people do not go to public outreach is is not to be considered a negative. It should be considered as an opportunity to get full community involvement. Congestion pricing, in 15 months of sitting at the Aspen Institute, going through all of this, community-based values, and there's no silver bullet. All of us have, we went through, I think, 4 international traffic experts. And one of the big things that we had to consider and evaluate is induced demand. If we put four lanes of unrestricted traffic, are we going to be increasing the amount of cars in town? And I think that the 31 members of that task force that met for over a year, I think there was a general agreement that there are too many cars in town, and that what we want to do is decrease the number of cars in town. It's not a decision to make it easier for more cars to get in town, because in my opinion, the $70 to $100 million to build a parking lot under Wagner Park can be much better spent, for example, with workforce housing. And I bring that up particularly because a lot of this is based on increased usage of mass transit into town. And right now, and since the pandemic, Tori and I have sat at numerous meetings of RAFTA where service levels have been decreased because we cannot get enough drivers for RAFTA. And if you want to increase ridership, you have to have an attractive alternative. You have to be able to have people sit instead of standing in buses. You have to know that my pick and alerts, my RAFTA alerts tells me every day of a number of routes that have been canceled during the day. The BRT service up and down the valley doesn't have enough drivers. And if you want to increase ridership, we talked about this maybe a year ago about a study that was done in Utah somewhere where there was fare fee free transportation that increased ridership. But after the pandemic, we want to increase ridership, but it's not an attractive alternative when somebody's standing for 40 miles up and down the valley. So it comes back again to workforce housing, and spending $70 million, $100 million for parking under Wagner Park when we need workforce housing, not just for RAFTA drivers, but every other sector of our economy. So for me, it's not about ease of, and I admit, and we all admit, that it's not going to solve the problem of how long it takes to get into Aspen. That this is really about safety, and you can't have a bridge that's restricting traffic if you can't bring in the food that people want to eat in the restaurant, or the buses can't go over the bridge. How are you going to bring your employees in? So it's, I read the 24 pages of comments, and some of them keep coming up again. What happens if we, and Rachel mentioned this, what happens if we don't make a decision? If the road deteriorates to a place where the CDOT decides you need a bridge, what are they going to build? What can they do? And it's entirely possible that they're not going to meet our 10 values that they did meet in the record of decision. So we might have the best we can get from CDOT right now with a record of decision. So I'm really advocating the use of future mass transit, whether it is, I don't think light rail is an option, but I think that trackless trams are an option. Do the S-curves allow for trackless trams? Can we increase ridership by using future mass transit and mobility options? All of these number of alternatives that were presented by the Aspen Institute mobility study, I always thought the title was too long, but all of the alternatives that were presented and studied and that are in the report that's available to anybody. And for all of you to spend time on the website. Look at the 40-page record of decision. Look at the 43 alternatives that were suggested. Look at what we're down to now as a preferred alternative. But I don't want to spend all of our time and money for consultants in education without answering the fundamental questions, the question of the S-curve as an option.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ward. Skippy?
First, I just want to thank you guys all for being here with us tonight. Thanks for bringing the snow, and if you could bring it back, that would be awesome. I'm more or less where Tori is. Do nothing is not an option. And, I've been spending a lot of time out in the community, and I just don't think the preferred alternative has the support right now. Frankly, I don't think it's close. I don't think that's, well, I can say in my sample size, and, you got to question your own selection biases. I don't know anyone who wants something different because they want more lanes or more cars or more congestion coming in. If anything, people are looking for solutions that have less impact, less focus on single occupancy vehicles, and the rest of it. So I do have trust in our community as to what we want. So, for that reason, I don't want to support moving forward with funding to do design or specific work on this proposal. But I definitely want to continue moving forward and involving the community more and getting more clarity. I think what Rachel said is a really smart first step. Getting clear on CDOT, the funding questions of how much, stipulations, timing, the project itself, if there are going to be changes made, what does that mean for the timing of the project, and how do we think about that in relationship to the current bridge and safety? Also, how do we think about the timing of delivering anything relative to the immediate issue right now, which is emergency evac, and are there opportunities to work on that concurrently so that we have plans as we're moving forward what we all know is going to be a many-year, if not decade, project. Let's see, what else here? I would want to know if the record were to be altered or reopened, what does that timeline really look like? Who else are we competing for staff time and dollars with? Rachel brought up a lot of good reasons to be concerned about the population numbers, for instance. What does that mean in the calculation of what we're expecting in traffic flow from a CDOT perspective? I also want to understand the other side of that. I understand the governor has given very clear direction that, CDOT in the state doesn't want to support additional capacity without solving the problem. And so might that help us in having a less single occupancy vehicle solution? So I think that that's a really good step. I also think continued community involvement, whether it's concurrent or after, is really important, because I've heard a lot of good ideas from our community. I do hear us aligned on getting to a solution that works and making improvements. So I would be willing to move forward something that continues to involve the community, but not around a specific answer, which the majority, at least right now, don't support. Again, my anecdotal view, that may or may not be the case, and certainly if you put a 1 to 2 on a ballot, that could change. But I do think the community really supports the goals of this, and so I want to see this move forward, but I'm not ready to put money behind this specific one at this time.
Thank you, Skippy. John, input?
Yeah, just a couple things. First of all, I just want to thank you for the presentation tonight. And I want to say to the general public, it was really helpful to me to read the record of decision and to understand why out of the 43 alternatives that came up, it was boiled down to what we have before us, the preferred alternative. I want to elaborate on something Rachel was saying about the age and condition of our bridge. Again, it's rated at 50.4 out of 100, and things might happen that are out of our control once it hits 50. I want to remind people that due to a public vote, the lift corridor plan passed, and there are estimated to be nearly 11,000 dump truckloads of fill dirt that are going to go over that Castle Creek Bridge before it's replaced. The last thing I want to say is, and I think everybody in this building probably shares this with me, but whatever decision we come to, it's my hope that this passes with higher than a 51 to 49% ratio, as so many of the other votes have been so close. I would like to see this pass ideally with more than 60%. So I'm hoping that we can do enough outreach so that we can come to a better consensus with our community on how to go forward.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Can I follow up a little bit? Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. And again, none of us want to do harm, but we also don't want to be negligent in our responsibilities to bring this question forward and to let people know the bridge is not going to last forever. I mean, none of us are driving 60-year-old cars on a regular basis, but we're driving across a 60-some-odd-year-old bridge. I've joked with John that if the bridge is weight restricted, it's not going to be 11,000 truckloads. It's going to be 22,000 half-full truckloads. And that doesn't count the cement trucks that will be coming in to pour the foundation at the same time. And if they're weight restricted, there'll be twice as many as we had before. So we did get to a point where the old Maroon Creek Bridge was weight restricted. And it starts to drive up the cost tremendously for anything delivered to the grocery stores or to the retail stores. So that's a bit of a problem. The other thing I wanted to point out is when we went into the old record of decision, there had actually been a vote for an unrestricted 4-lane. Mayor Sterling in the back remembers that. It was the same vote as the Ritz and the Furban. But we had a PM10 problem with air quality, particulate matter below 10 microns, which embeds in people's lungs. Because we were a non-attainment area, we had additional leverage and status with CDOT and the Federal Highway Administration. They had a policy, and I'm trying to think, I don't know if it's concurrence, but I think it might be something like that. It was a C word, that there could be no federal money spent on a project that would worsen the air quality of someone already in a PM10 situation. And so that's why we were able to go down to the Department of, it used to be the Department of Highways. They were just transitioning into the Department of Transportation, and tell them we wanted something more. But we are no longer a non-attainment area. We've taken care of that PM10 problem. We monitor it, and but that's no longer a leverage point that we used to have. The reading of the record of decision and looking at some of the old appendixes as to why other alternatives were screened out, just bear in mind that it's not just the Castle Creek Bridge. It's then how do you connect with Main Street. And that alignment showed the big white Victorian next to the Hickory House being taken out. It's also very likely that one way or the other, you get traffic flowing directly to across Merle, or a widened S-curves around the Hickory House corner and Forest Service corner, widened to fit all that through there. You're still going to end up with traffic lights for safety, because people are going to need to get out of those neighborhoods there and onto the road safely, things like that. It's not as if we're going to be able to continue this. I was proud when I told my family I moved to a county that only had one traffic light, and then I've watched them go up and down the valley for safety. And at the end of the day, CDOT's main concern is always public safety. It's not speed. You know, we've heard about the how we should have an interchange at the Airport Business Center, interchange here and there, and so that people can just speed through without stoplights. But their priority is going to be public safety. So those were my only other comments. I think we're all talking about mobility for public without their car, without a single occupant vehicle for the most part, and trying to manage and have a system that our public can control and manage traffic growth in the future, or we're going to have a system to allow better access for SOVs. That's how I see the choices shaping out, and I hope people are there to make the right choices. Thank you.
Thanks. Do you have more comments, Ward?
Yeah, one of them just left my mind, but maybe it'll come back to me while I'm talking about this. I made an appeal for people to stay engaged, and I mean not just through the next couple of months, I mean through the next few years. When a decision is made, oftentimes we hear people say, well, this is the first I ever heard about it. We've done a lot of outreach. We will continue to do outreach. And it's important for people to stay informed, stay engaged, let us know, let the city know where you have objections, where you think it's good. It's so infrequent, it seems, that we hear people say, yeah, that's a good idea, because everybody wants to complain instead of agreeing with something. So I wish that other one would come back to my mind.
You got one if you want a little breather.
There's always tomorrow, yeah.
You have a great
Yeah.
memory, it's just short.
That's right. Quoted me on that.
That's yours, Ward.
Okay.
I'm going to go to Skippy then for
Yeah,
another-
just one last comment I left off my list, just to not sow seeds of false hope for anyone who maybe was reading into any ambiguity in my comments. If we move forward and there's either light alterations to this or a change, I will not be supporting any project that comes forward that adds lanes of general vehicle traffic or, increases congestion. So,
I remembered,
Okay.
just to be clear.
yeah, I think that the process that the staff outlined is proper. I just, in the timeline, all of that I think is right, but I do think that we have to answer that foundational corridor question.
Thanks, Ward. All right, I'll make a few comments and then wrap this up, and we'll get our summary and we'll conclude this meeting. Real quickly, thank you very much to staff. Thank you so much to everybody that's in the audience here. We have received correspondence from a number of you in the audience. I want to encourage you to continue to do that, especially after this meeting. Following up this meeting, please send on any emails that you have for input for us. I wanted to say that my ultimate goal here is to give our community a choice. So regardless of what I think or what I feel or what I want to get to is giving our community the ability to choose their future and their direction. What I see on the screen in front of me, I don't think is what we should be working off of. I don't think this community would get to the support of the large swath that goes through the maroon on this slide. What I've heard over these past couple months is that people would like to see what the smallest footprint there could look like. And we've all gone around this wheel a couple times, but what I've heard is that there's a couple of objections. You have Cemetery Lane residents who are not excited about coming in town to get out of town and get to the schools, which many of them do. You've heard from a lot of people that there's not excitement around a traffic light at 7th and Main and concerns around that. So I'm wondering, for those that do support a new bridge and new alignment, there was the preferred alternative iteration that had a two lanes of general traffic and the light rail corridor. And what I'm wondering is, as the so-called split shot had 2 lanes coming in across Marold, 1 bus lane and 1 general traffic lane, and what that footprint looks like. It solves a couple of the issues. I think it addresses some of the 10 points that these we've been looking at for meeting up to some standards. And I just want to put that out there because along with the questions that Rachel asked about what does it mean for reopening the ROD, what is CDOT's course on this? My hope is to get something, as others have said up here, that is more than a 51-49 support. We want to move forward with something that our community recognizes as the best solution for our entire community. And so I'm wondering about looking at that as part of that alternative that we look at. I appreciate what we've heard up here is that we're looking for some answers before we are ready to move forward with the RFP responses. there was a desire for next council to be looking at that before we start approving any funding moving forward there. So we had very specifically CDOT answers, questions about the IMS and the integration of the IMS. Ward brought up some further questions about the S-curves. That includes accelerated bridge construction or S-curve options. Skippy reiterated looking at some of the EVAC plans that are in existence now and how do we perfect those or make those better for our public's understanding. I would add on to that, I still think there's things that we can be doing in the near term to improve our traffic flow and congestion issues, as well as the West End traffic. But that's a different conversation than this. As I look to the questions that you put forth to council, council supporting transitioning from proactive to responsive communication for the period beginning until phase 2. I think what I've heard is, yes, we would like to get the questions answered, shared back out in some form, but not if that is triggering the RFP process, that we should be in this 1.5, I think it was called on the slide, that yes, 1.5 is where we want to be. We want to get these questions answered. I didn't hear if there were any groups that were missed during this process that need to be included in the upcoming awareness, except for the one emphasis on the IMS and making sure that that is part of the discussions. How much community outreach? This council has always supported as much interaction, communication, and outreach as we can. So I would think that when we do get to a next phase, that we will be looking for as much robust interaction as possible.
Great summary. It's really helpful, and I think, and our plan will be to come back when we know both the answers to the questions that are being sent to Federal Highway Administration and CDOT, and also when we can, we'll also go back and get a better idea of which questions from the community. So there'll be the CDOT ones and FHWA, and then there may be questions additional that the community asked, and we'll get a handle on which ones can we answer without having to go to schematic design, and which ones might you want to answer just by going to an origin and destination study, for example.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very, very good. Yeah, as I said, I really appreciate the team's work, and I think those are the next steps. It's just that maybe there's a few steps before those and a little resequencing of those, but it looks good. And again, truly appreciate all the outreach, all the meetings, all the effort. It means a lot. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, I would just like to confirm if the majority of council is in agreement with the summary and next steps, because I've not heard from all of you. It would be really helpful so we have clear direction from the table. Thank you.
John?
Yes, I support the transitioning. I'm not aware if there are any groups that were missed. It seems like we were pretty thorough. And more outreach, please.
And specifically, it's about the request. So what I heard is slow down the RFP. That is what I heard here. And until you have this other information from the Federal Highway Administration, and that you want to prioritize portions of an RFP, portions of work that a consultant team would do, for pieces of it before others. So you would like to direct that. And that's what I'm confirming, is that we will bring you back options of what that would look like.
Okay.
In terms of that, and what questions we are unable to answer the community without schematic design. I think that's a really important thing we owe you in helping you choose the pros and cons of whether you wish to go there. Does that?
Yep. That gets it.
Okay. I have 4 of you nodding your head. I'll go with that.
I got one question mark on a forehead over here.
I mean, I agreed with Tori's summary, and that's all fine. Like, the question mark on my head was just, I wonder how much, I don't know. When I hear people asking questions, it's not clear to me, as you're indicating, which of those things require schematic design or not, but it's also not clear to me how many, if we assume that it needs schematic design, but the specificity of the question may be less than we think. And so I just wonder if there's a way to sort of check in on some of those questions that we think need schematic design with the questioner to ask for the level of detail they really want, you
But
know?
how about if, when we do the other steps that are going to be first, they bring back the questions to say these will be
Yeah, yeah.
what can be answered
Yeah.
by schematic design, and
that's fine.
these are the ones that can't.
Right, and that's what I'm inferring is that you would another level of detail before paying for those services for the community. Yeah, no problem.
Okay,
Yeah. Very good.
All right.
unquestioned.
Meeting adjourned?
All right, want to thank you guys all again for coming today. Have a wonderful Valentine's Day tomorrow, everybody. We are back with a regularly scheduled meeting, which starts at 5 p.m. And of course, we always welcome citizen comments. So please feel free to join us tomorrow as well. Thank you.
Do we have to dress in like rose corsages or anything?
You should.
Wow.